Before we begin the episode, I would like to thank our sponsor, Chin Up Goggles, the new generation of vision training. Its simplistic design eliminates downward vision, improving a player's spatial awareness, anticipation, skill acquisition and execution. The findings have been supported by scientific research in CIT, now MTU. Be sure to visit chinupgoggles.com for more. Welcome back to the Sideline Live podcast. You can follow us over on Twitter and Instagram at the Sideline Live. We'd love to hear from you. On episode 52, I am delighted to be joined by under-18 Irish men's head basketball coach Paul Kelleher. We discuss a wide variety of topics including player development, the trials process, video analysis, player-driven video analysis, player feedback and so much more. I hope you enjoy. Hi Paul, thanks a million for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Orla. I'm delighted to be here.
Brilliant. So before we get into everything, because we have a lot to discuss, would you mind giving yourself a bit of an intro to the coaches and listeners who don't know who you are?
Yeah, my name is Paul Kelleher. I've been coaching 24 years now. Coached Super League at UCC Demons, Neptune, Glanmire, UL Eagles, and have coached internationally for the past 15 years. And I'm also a career guidance counsellor at Cláiste Eamon Cork.
Very good. So we're going to get into everything coaching. I've sent you the list of questions, but before we get into it, at what stage in your career, I know you started off as a skills coach, but did you make the jump to, as you mentioned there, Super League, international levels?
So I started at 17 and kind of got the grow for it. Coached under 11s and stuff like that for a few years. And then when I was in my first year of college in Tralee, I remember there was a Wednesday night and I was watching Liverpool in Hennessy's in Tralee. I got a phone call from Pat Price, and it was just before, say, the old cup situation where it was under 19 and it was on the one weekend. So Pat obviously was in a clash because the 19s were in the final and just needed a little bit of help off the floor. So asked me to get involved, and yeah, that was the beginning of the end, I suppose, really.
Yeah, very good. So we're going to chat about all things development, talent and a lot of other subjects. But for yourself, you're the under-18 men's head coach. I want to discuss a little bit about the trials process. We were chatting a little bit before recording there. You haven't started the 2022 programme yet. But I suppose, what is your usual structure to the trials, and how does that all work, assuming COVID is not around?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, and listen to all the podcasts and all the coaches have said, like, every game has evolved, every sport has evolved. I think we've probably learned a better way of doing things, which is a cliche phrase now, across all podcasts and coaching seminars. But I also think we haven't really found a better way. We found a way to add to what we've already done. I think the old style was we let them play, we let them scrimmage, we let them figure it out. And sometimes players get hidden in that and we miss players. So over the past number of processes, we've actually started practicing our drives. So we've let them play 1-on-1, we've let them play 2-on-2, we've let them play 3-on-3, and we've built it up into scenarios that we think might develop throughout the program and where we want to get to as a team. General game activities, we'll do a bit of shooting, we'll actually have some defensive drills. And, we'll find players that traditionally, might have been hidden because we're allowing them to express themselves in a 1-on-1, in a 2-on-2, and we find different strengths. We find different areas that we say, no, we might be able to find something for that player, get them on a list. And then obviously we play at the end, live 5v5 up and down, and more players come out of the woodwork because that's their strength. So I think we do a very fair process in giving every kind of scenario where people can show their strengths. And if a player shows a strength in his 3-on-3 but doesn't really show a strength in a 4-4, 5-on-5 or up and down, I think we're going to take them back for another look. So I think it's giving them all the opportunities to see what they can bring to the table, and not just be pigeonholed because they can't play 5-on-5 up and down. And that's our job in the longer process, to help them evolve into that if it's at all possible.
Mm-hmm. I love the way you mentioned there being able to to kind of bring players out of the woodwork. Let's say in a 5-on-5 situation, my background's Gaelic football, like if you're playing 15-on-15, you've got maybe 8 players touching the ball in a match for the majority of the match, so you've got how many left standing. Same in a basketball, one person has the ball, there's 9 other players there. Chances are in a 5-on-5 game, 3 of those aren't really going to touch the ball that much. I love the way you've brought that in. Do you kind of focus on, do you do any sort of skills work in the trials process? Do you bring in any like plays or that kind of tactical side of things, or is it more just as you said, 1-on-1, 2-on-2, 5-on-5?
We might put a bit of a constraint on it in terms of like, you know, reducing the amount of dribbles so that we see who's explosive, who's not explosive. You know, who can read a defender being off them. Are they willing to catch and shoot right off the bat, even in a 1-on-1 setting? You know, where we might toss to the defense, get it back, and now we're live, and the defender might back off, and are they confident enough to shoot it? We might put a relocation constraint into it. We might do all these sort of things in the process just to see who can grab things pretty quickly. And one of the things that we really look for, and we emphasize this right away, we're looking for great listeners. Because obviously basketball is a listening game in timeouts, teammates talking to each other, you know, end of game scenarios. So that's one thing that we identify right off the bat. If you're a great listener, you have a great opportunity of progressing with the squad. And everything else, if you're a great listener, we think we can help you add to your toolbox and develop your weapons and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of criteria that we look for within the process. And what I've found over the years is that, you know, there are certain players that are going to be involved in schools finals, club finals, all the time. So all those players are known. But there hasn't been a squad yet where we haven't found somebody from a non-traditional basketball background or county or area. And it's been great to see those players come out. And I think what we've done now, by giving all those players processes in 1-on-1s, 2-on-2s, they get a chance to expose themselves and their skill set. And it might be that they've got extra length. It might be that they're a great defender. It might be that they're a great passer. And can they make other players around them great as well? So I do think that the process that we've done now allows us to find all the players. And one of the things that we also do, and I've been doing this for about 5 or 6 years now, is I tend to bring in other coaches from outside. So we try to bring in 5 or 6 coaches who are not involved in the squad, who have no vested interest in this player being selected or that player being selected. So I think what we've done with that process is that we have a lot of eyes in the process of talent identification, and we'll huddle up every now and again, you know, and we find the common names, and then we can push them, you know, right where they're in, and now we look for other. So we normally get to about maybe 15, 20 easy. Okay. And then, you know, somebody might have 5 names, I might have 5 names, whatever, and we're kind of saying, no, I've only got one of those names. So now we're all looking at those players again, or, you know, this player may not be right, this player may not be right. So I think what we do is we do a really fair process in trying to make sure that we find the right players that are suited to progressing with the squad.
I love the way you mentioned listening. I had a slide up from a coaching webinar. I've been kind of looking into different parts of it, and it was 10 things that don't require talent. And to me, listening is probably actually number 2 or number 3. Attitude for me is number 1. Is listening something that as a coach you can teach your player, or is it that the player needs to make that decision, whether it's subconsciously or consciously?
Good question. I suppose let me give you an example. We played Templeogue in a league game in Diablo Hall a number of years back, and we were 9 up with like 3.5 minutes to go, and Templeogue were really experienced and we were very inexperienced with the young team, and they found a way to get back in the game, and it was a tie game, 4 seconds left, and I called a timeout, and my first question was, who wants to be a screener? And straight off the bat, Jer Noonan goes, me. I'm going to be your best screener right now. So he heard what we needed at that point, and he freed up Cian Heafy for a wonderful lob, and we just missed the opportunity and went to overtime. We lost in overtime, but that's the sort of stuff, end of game scenarios, who's listening for what we need as a team right now. And I think that comes with experience. I think it's on the coaching staff to bring scenarios every day where the kids have to learn to listen. And the one thing I've always learned or always seen over the process, whether it's 16 national team or 18 national team, is if we put scenarios every day where they have to listen to each other, where they have to listen to us, where they have to be in scenarios like with this last thing that we did. When we scrimmaged, we obviously couldn't scrimmage against anybody with COVID and we were in our own bubble. We scrimmaged every single day for 40 minutes. We put 40 minutes on the clock. We played a full game. They took the time out. So they had to learn to listen to each other. And I would listen to them. And that's one thing I've gotten better at in the last 2 years, is actually listening to the players or what they need. I think you were at one of our practices where we threw the session plan out the window because it was the first 10 minutes after the break was awful. And I just said, what do we need right now? And they said, I think we just need to just play. We haven't played enough. Can we just play a 40-minute game? And that was the instigator for us doing that for the next 3 weeks leading into the Euro Challenges. So I learned to listen, which was not a great strength of mine over the years. But so I think with this last program, we were great listeners, and I became a better listener because I learned from them.
How was it at the beginning of those sessions where you allowed the players to take the team huddles and the timeouts and the half times? Like, I know yourself and Andy were observing now. You didn't say anything because you were letting them do it, but at the beginning, how hard was it to let them go off by themselves, and maybe sometimes they hadn't the experience to say what was needed at the time?
So it was a massive challenge for me because it's new for me. It's something I was never great at. I was always the coach that always wanted to be the voice in the room. Coaching, I told you, you do, and I've had to reinvent myself over the last 3, 4, 5 years to kind of move with the times of what players are needing right now. So it was really tough for me not to step in. But I do think my being trained as a guidance counselor in the last couple of years has allowed me to be better at that. So, but one of the things that we, at the start of that process, we have specific language that we want to use, that we like to use. And I didn't really listen to what they were telling each other. I wanted to hear our language and how they spoke to each other. So the only thing that I would say to them is, what's our language for that? What's our language for that? And then they would re-say the same thing with our language as opposed to just general statements. So the first part of that was just making sure that we spoke in our language. And I think that helped us massively in the latter end, going to the Euro Challengers, of being successful when we had to speak to each other in a good manner.
How early do you bring in that language into, whether it's after the trials, obviously, because the team is there, you have a panel formed, but how early is that brought into the process and the players start to pick up the different terms and terminology?
During the trials. During
the trials, okay.
Yeah, we speak our language during that. We let them know this is what we are, this is our standard, this is what we're going to do. So it won't be basic stuff. So it might be like, or pipe runs, or it might be flattening the defense. So just generic stuff that like everybody does, but just that's our phraseology for it. So like, we'll say this is what you might hear at your club level, but this is what we call it. So we're trying to let them know that they've heard this before. This is nothing new, but this is what we're calling it. So so it'll just be some 2, 3, 4 maybe max generic language pieces that so that they're aware that we do talk in a certain way in here if you want to stay involved.
Without getting in too specific, because I think we could have a 3-hour conversation about it, but where did you pick up the different terms? Like you mentioned there, pipe. I heard you talk about other ones before.
Yeah, I guess I just built it up over the years. I've been very fortunate that, before COVID kicked in the old style, you spend your money, you get a plane ticket, you go to practice, you go to camps in Europe, you go to camps in the States, you get to know people, when Zoom wasn't around and all that sort of stuff. So just getting to know people, getting their terms. So like we call the charred circle jail. That's a Rick Pitino, but actually I got that on a video clip when I was watching one of his clinics. So we just build it up over time. But I've always tried to attach an image or something that the players can associate with to help sell the language better. So like we call it like rainbow passes. We want to force rainbow passes, and at the bottom of rainbows is a pot of gold. So when we force a rainbow pass, that gives us an opportunity to steal the gold. So the ball is gold. That's what we're trying to chase. Whereas if we allow laser passes, lasers kill you. So having an attachment to our language with an image is vitally important for us in what we're trying to achieve.
Brilliant. I love that. Do you actually write these down for the players? Do they get like a handout, or is it just something they hear repetitively?
I have a Google slide with everything from offensive to transition to so we just a matter of share, put the addresses in and off we go, or print or download as a PDF and send it that way. So yeah, so it's ready to go all the time.
Okay, very good. I'm interested in the area of skills and skill development. Is that part of, I guess, the program? Is that something you look at, whether it's technique, kind of overskilling, and what aspects do you bring in, and how early do you bring that in?
Great question. And I think that's evolved over time. And I've had some really wonderful people to be around that have helped me trying to get there. I think Kieran O'Sullivan is wonderful at that. I mean, he's him and Francis, Mark McGettrick. I've then been on calls with other people outside the country without dropping names and stuff. But I think I've evolved with that process. I would have been very much an on air coach in the past, and it would have led to a massive frustration by me on the sideline towards the players when we didn't get it right in games. And there's still a place for that. I think what I've defined coaching right now for me is giving confidence to a player. And by giving a confidence to a player, can we then put that confidence and make a team around it that are all confident? So each player may need to be given confidence in different ways. So for Orla, it might that if we're doing a pro stop, I might need to do that with Orla on air first before she grasps it going into live play. For, I don't know, let's just say Paul Kelleher, he might be able to do that live right off the bat. So there's no point in bringing him back. So mixing all of those personal skill sets, whereas Orla might be a better shooter, so she doesn't need to be taught shooting technique on air, but Paul might be an awful shooter, so he needs a bit more on air time to get confidence that way before he can put it into play. So I think I've tried to, how can this player get confidence within our team setting and get a team confidence around all of that? So confidence is something that I've really kind of tried to build it around over the last couple of years around the team. I feel like I've strayed away from the question.
That's all right. Don't worry. I never stick to the question list, so we'll just keep going. But with the confidence side of things, I'm interested in that, and I'm always interested in the individual versus team approach. Is that something you do with the players at practices? Is it away from practice? Is it before or after? Whether it's through Zoom now with COVID, how do you approach that side of thing?
I think again I've evolved with that. I wasn't great with it. But the last couple of years, I think, has allowed me to reflect. I think COVID's been great for me. I love COVID in terms of developing as a coach with the amount of access that we have to it, that the amount of sharing that people were willing to give. And I suppose, coming off of 22, 23 years of going from Super League, national team, back into it again, I really had no air to, or no room to breathe and reflect and adapt. And it takes a different skill set to be able to do that on the fly. But I think having not coached senior for the last couple of years has actually allowed me breathing space to say, I didn't do this well. Why didn't I do this well? Well, I didn't connect with the players. I didn't carry myself correctly in certain situations or whatever it was, or, I didn't teach this well. This is how I'm going to teach it going forward. Or, I didn't question well enough to find out the whys of the players or even why I was coaching. You know what I mean? So I think there's an awful lot there that when you've, room to breathe and reflect, I think being aware and being able to reflect are two completely different things. I was aware of an awful lot of my weaknesses as a coach for a very, very long time, but I wasn't able to reflect properly on how to make those changes. So I think you have to allow yourself to be able to reflect and not just rote learn things off just because you hear something, cool by somebody. Doesn't mean that you're able to implement that, because it might not be a skill set of yours. And I think what COVID has done for an awful lot of coaches that are young and want to make that step, they've heard it, they've learned it, but they haven't experienced it yet, because they haven't they haven't taught Paul Kelleher or they haven't taught Orla how to do it and fail teaching it or be successful teaching it or getting the experience of knowing, crap, I failed at teaching that player how to do this. How do I do it better for that style of player? And I think that's, I think with all the failures I've had as a coach, I've been able to reflect because of the stuff I've heard. Oh, that's why he failed. Yeah, I remember that. That's why that didn't work that time. Or, you know what? I've actually done that, but I didn't realize why it worked. Now I do because I heard the theory behind it. But now that I know the theory behind it, I might use that more consistently. Whereas it just worked out one time, and I was like, yeah, that was cool, but didn't really know why it worked.
Yeah.
So I think experiencing the theory is vitally important, not just being able to rote learn off the theory or what we hear is cool or whatever it is. So I think coaching is a lonely place. It's a trial and error place. And when you fail, the knives are out, everybody's out for you. So, I think that's something that we have to learn to deal with as coaches as well. And I wasn't great at it as a young coach, but I think I've learned to be able to put that aside and drive on. Obviously, some things still hurt it when you hear nasty things said and stuff like that. But it's part of it, and I think when you sign up to being a coach, you need to understand that that's part of the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Out of interest, you mentioned there, why do you coach? What is, I guess, the purpose behind you coaching and the reason?
I think that's evolved over the years too.
Okay.
I think when I was a young coach, it was winning. It was all the wrong things. Put myself in all the wrong environments because the fact that I felt winning was what people perceived to be a good coach. So I put I wanted to be a professional coach. I wanted to coach abroad. I wanted to experience it as a living. So because I perceived winning to get me there, I probably coached the wrong way for a very, very long time. And my why as a coach probably wasn't what it should have been. And therefore I probably let a lot of players down. I probably didn't give them everything that they needed because I was chasing my why rather than actually understanding the player's why. And that's something I suppose COVID has let me reflect on. So hopefully I'll be a better coach for players moving forward because hopefully I'll be able to understand their why, match it with why I want to coach. And hopefully that will serve the player better. And I'll enjoy my coaching more because of the fact that my why now is a lot different to what it was when I was 20, 25, 30. And I'm at peace of where I am now because, I've realized why I wanted to coach.
Is that something that you ask the player on a one-to-one? Is it a player activity that you find out their why?
So I experimented an awful lot with the Irish team just gone by, because I hadn't done all these things in the past, and I loved what we achieved with that group, albeit that we didn't get the results that we wanted, but the performances were at a level where I was like, yeah, this style of coaching does work. So it was new for me. And yeah, we had multiple one-on-ones via Zoom, after each practice, players would come up and, how did I do today? And, we'd reflect upon that. So I felt because I was at peace of how I wanted to coach now, the players were far more open to coming in and the questions that they were asked and things like that. So yeah, I definitely think it helps.
And how early in the program do players get feedback? Like you said there, one-to-one. Is that something that when there's still a larger panel of players, is that something that is given to players, that feedback, let's say, or if they're dropped, do they get feedback, or is that just not part of the process?
I think we've always been open, like when we do a follow-up with the parents, if your son requires more feedback, then we're more than happy to give that. And we do try and talk to all the players either before practice, after practice, might be during practice. What are you doing right here? How are you feeling about this? Are you struggling with this? Do you think you're doing well here or whatever it is? And we'll have those chats and we let them bring it out themselves. I wasn't always great at that. It's something I've evolved in over the last couple of years. And I think it does help when the player brings their information to you. It allows you then help them in their why. And I think that's been a massive thing that we really experimented on in the last program, and it worked really, really well for players. And sometimes they hear information they don't like, and sometimes the instant shock of hearing something that they always thought they were good at, and now it's really actually not what they were good at. But then they come back the following, they say, yeah, I understand what you're saying. And now they drive on. And we had a couple of players this past summer who really initially were like shocked at the information they got, but then said, you know what, let's give this a go. And they drove on, and I thought they were very, very good by come the end of the program.
Do you think that's what separates the great from the good players, is being able to take that shock and that feedback of, do you know what, Orla, you're not as good as you think you are in X, Y, and Z. You need to work on it. And instead of me pouting and getting pissed off and saying, right, whatever, Paul, whatever you think, I take the feedback on board and I just attack my weaknesses. I always think some players attack their weaknesses so much they nearly become strengths.
Yeah. Danny Murphy shared on a I think it was a News Talk show a couple of months back when Gerard Houllier passed away, and he said he was a brilliant man and he knew when to say it, how to say it, and the right time to say it. And they just won the treble of the UEFA, the two cups in England, and they were celebrating, and Gerard Houllier in the middle of the celebration said, Danny, you need to come back next year, whatever amount of weight down. And he said, what? And he disagreed. And he said, have you ever played for England? And Danny Murphy hadn't played for England. So it was just like one subtle thing to make you realize, you know what, you still have another step to go. And he said that Danny Murphy came back, whatever amount of weight that he had to have lost and be in shape. And he actually played for England the following year. So I think you're right. The great players do handle the shock. It may not be immediate, but in time it does happen. I know Roy won't mind me sharing the story, but you know, when Roy was under 16 with us, we had this conditioning drill that we always did before we finished up in the break, and you know, we had consequences and all that sort of stuff. And they had done the consequence off of not being successful during the drill, and they were about to walk off for their break. And I said, lads, we still got to do our pre-break activity. And Roy was pissed. Just stared me, whipped off the top, got himself set up, and blew his own record out the window. Wow. Stared me after it, picked up his top, went off. But like, it just showed me there's an edge with the great players. There's like, yeah, I have that edge. I have to maintain that standard. I have to go there the whole time. And I think that's what separates the players. You know, they always are on the edge. You know, Ronaldo, Messi, you know, Salah this weekend, they're constantly pushing the boundaries. I think when you push the boundaries, you find yourself getting to a place that you never thought you were able to get to. I think some players are afraid to go there, and that's why they don't hear and they don't listen. And sometimes they don't accept feedback because they're afraid of going to a place that they don't realize they can actually be really, really good at. So maybe it's a fear thing, but the great players are not afraid of going there.
Is that a conversation you have with players surrounding potential and being able to, whether you put it honestly in a positive or negative light, and you kind of sit me down early and say, look, do you know what, you're not going to make the WNBA, but this is your potential and I'm going to do everything I can to get you here?
So it's a great question. And I think I've done a better job over the last few years in terms of, one, finding out their why, and then how are you going to get there? So asking them first what they think they need to go, what they need to get to that place, and then you operating around that and using that as their accountability stick to kind of say, well, you want to get here, this is how we're going to get here. And if you're the one that identified this with me, so we need to get here by this, and this. Are you prepared to do that? And the answer is either yes or it's no. But now I'm able to hold them accountable to what they wanted to do and their why, as opposed to me thinking, Orla might want to go to the WNBA, but I haven't asked her. So I'm coaching her in a way that she doesn't want to be coached. Orla might just want to play recreationally. So now my coaching has to be different for Orla than it is for, let's say, whoever. You know, so like that's what we just have to be aware of, is that the players wise might be different to the team wise, and we need, as coaches, we need to be able to adjust that. And that's at a club level. At international level, their whys are all the same. But at club level, we have to understand that some player might want to just play recreation. He might want to play with his best friend. He might be okay with being the 8th, 9th, 10th guy because he's okay with getting the 3 or 4 minutes because he's around his why, which is social outlet, meeting friends, all that sort of stuff. So we just need to understand the whys inside of the environment that the players want to be at.
You mentioned there conditioning. How do you structure your sessions? I know it obviously depends on the team and the goals and the players, but generally, is there a specific structure that you do follow for training and kind of the double sessions and the weekend sessions?
I think what the Federation have done a really good job with Pete Madsen and Kevin Foley is making sure that the S&C has become a real integral part of the program. Through lockdown, we had S&C on Zooms. What was interesting was that when we got back on the floor, everything that we had done was stationary. I felt the kids had forgotten how to run properly. So when we got back into practice, Declan, our S&C guy, it was actually all about learning to run again, how to use the hips, how to move properly, and activate the muscles properly again. And once we got that down, then we went into more conditioning, all that sort of stuff. But we had to do a little bit more this time because we had been off for 18 months. So how we structured this time, Declan had an awful lot of autonomy on this. We'd speak leading up to the practice, how much time he needs, what he's looking to do. And I would base my practice around the energy levels of the players then, based on what Declan was going to do. And we had a really good relationship with that way. So it worked really well for us.
And is that conversation like, Paul, look, we're going to be doing X and Y and S&C. So let's say the effort level is 7 out of 10. So you can't be blasting players looking for 10 out of 10 straight after what I'm doing with them.
Exactly. Or it might be a situation where Declan, look, I need to get this in today. What are you looking at doing? And he might say, I'll taper back on what I'm planning on doing, but I'll still be able to achieve what I want to do. So Declan and I had a wonderful relationship in that respect. And he was really easy to work with.
Skills wise and I suppose tactical wise, going through plays and different drills, what sort of percentages do you give for each of them? I know it would vary session to session, but how much importance is those different components of the game?
One of the things that we started to do when we got back in the floor, and it was a new thing for me, we started doing pips. I started with the club last year, and we just didn't have enough time really to do it with the national team when we only had 6-8 weeks to get ready technically for the Euro Challenge. But personal improvement plans, so like pip is a seed. We want to plant seeds and let them grow a little bit. And something I've developed over the last couple of years. But with the club, we started doing the first 10 minutes of practice, you do your pip. So your pip might be this week, it might be reverse layups, it might be, through legs and attack off of 1 foot. Whereas our post player might be about drop stepping. He just needs to get that right, or so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So each player's pip, they would work on their pip, and that might change 2 weeks later then. So, if Orl and Paul have, they're working on their free throws, then we're going to merge them together and they're working on their pips together. And that might change 2 weeks later because I might have to do a better job of my defensive sliding and I might match up with somebody else in that. So we try and have 6 kind of pods of pip sessions and stuff like that. So yeah, so pips is how we're developing our skills, and then we're trying to go into the team oriented stuff of live 1v1, 2v2, 3v3, tactically relocation, run the pipe, flatten defense, things like that.
Do the players have much of an input, let's say, for the pip? Like, can I turn around and say, Paul, look, I think I need to work on my shooting? Or is it sort of just coach driven that, look, Orly, you need to work on your dribbling here a bit more?
I think with the younger kids, we kind of, I really experimented with the younger kids. I haven't done a whole lot of it with the older, but obviously with more time this year with national team, that's something that we're going to work collaboratively with the players when we get the squad together. So we'll find out what they believe they need to work on. Then we will see what we think they need to work on, and maybe their pips might be one that they feel they need to work on and one that we feel they need to work on. So 5 minutes of theirs and 5 minutes of theirs. So it's still experimental right now, but it's proved quite fruitful with the younger age groups, and we can see their skill sets evolving because of it.
Out of interest, speaking of skills, what do you think is the most underrated or skill or attribute in the game at the moment?
I actually think passing. And that can be done, I think passing under pressure, passing, to see, passing to find the right shooters, even receiving, like people put passing as the giving. I think being receivers off of passing is just as important. I don't think we actually work on that enough in getting to open space and being a great receiver to help the passer. So I think it's always been a two-way thing for me, the passing and the receiver, and being in open passing lanes and how you can get open to be a great receiver just as much as being a great person with vision to see the right pass, and stuff like that. So I think passing is something that definitely, and being willing to leave it go. A lot of players right now, like, they just want to bounce the hell out of it and things like that. And their vision isn't great and their passing isn't great. So that's one thing that we really emphasize with the national team is you got to be a willing passer to be able to help somebody else to be successful as well.
How do you coach vision? Is that something that you think can be taught, or is that just a natural attribute you have?
I would have always, as I said, I grew up being a 5-on-0 guy or an on-0 guy, but I think definitely you have to game it. And I think, it's been a long process and a reinvention on my part, but definitely I think the more small side of games, we call them games of purpose. So what's the purpose of the game that you're trying to do? Is it passing? Is it screening? Is it a cutting? What's the purpose of it? But I think more games of purpose definitely help that the speed of the decision and making the right decision.
You mentioned on the Hoopfolio podcast episode, which I'll link below, about teaching players to be better teammates. How do you teach that to really any age group or any level? Because I suppose the same core components would be transferable to all ages.
I think it's tough. I think with society that we're in at the moment, I think it's a very Mayfain thing right now. And, I think parents want their kids to be successful and they want their kids to be in the spotlight. And so I think it's harder than it's ever been before. But I think when you're in an environment where you preach it every day, you identify, players, especially when somebody's having a really bad day, having a really bad practice, but they're still making sure that everybody else is trying to have a great time. I really call those. I get excited over those, and I get kind of silly over it and call them breakthrough moments and all that sort of stuff, and overindulge in it in one respect. So I think it's, as leaders, we have to make sure that we have to catch them being great for their teammates. And I think the more you emphasize that, they see the value of it. And one of the things I got off Bob McKillop is if you emphasize it enough and you show the value of it enough, they'll take it on board as something that's a value to them. So that's something that, and we have a phrase, you have to be appreciative of other people's success. If you're not appreciative of other people's success, then you're probably not going to be a great fit for what we want in our culture and our value system.
Mm-hmm. We mentioned before video analysis. When did you actually start to introduce that with your teams, and how did you find it first, and then how did the players find it watching themselves and just seeing this other angle of the game that they just never would have seen before?
I remember Doug Leichner when he was there, and we were short a staff member, and the club felt that we were short a video guy. Doug felt we were short a video guy, and the club felt we were short a stats guy. I remember Doug saying, I can stat the game from video, I can't video the game from stats.
Yeah.
So we sacrificed, because we couldn't get staff member, we always brought a video guy, and we've statted the game afterwards. I was probably the most accurate stats in the league because we really emphasized it. But that's when I realized the importance of video. You can't video from stats, but you can stat from video. And it just really showed right off that was like, yeah, I need to be great at video. I need to find a way of being great at video. And we kind of introduced video pretty much right off the bat. So when we did this year's team, when we were in COVID, when we Zoomed every Sunday, video was a massive part, and we got them to create their own video, and we got them to create the video and put our language on the video. And I think we got Georgia was the first thing that we did, and we broke them into 4 groups, and each group had to analyze 1 quarter and bring it back what they felt that from our language we did well from the 2019 team and what we didn't do well. And it was really good. And they came up with new video apps like KindMaster and stuff like that. And I always use Final Cut Pro, but KindMaster was great for like putting the lines in and circling and all that sort of stuff. So it was I think video is huge. I think when we got back on the floor, because we'd done so much video and so much analysis, they knew exactly what we were looking for because they'd seen it. And
Yeah.
then when they got back on the floor, they were experiencing it. So when we got back on the floor for the first couple of sessions, I resent the videos that I had sent them the whole time. And I said, right, watch what these guys are doing and see what we did in the practices. And it just clicked right off the bat. So I think video is huge, but I think using the tendencies of what you want to achieve. I see so many people use video and just randomly take things. Oh, we didn't do this way. That wasn't good, but it had nothing to do with the tendency, the offensive or defensive or transition wise. So I think using your language, using your tendencies, and not just throwing in random stuff here and there just because you want to show a bunch of clips. I think tendencies are huge for the success of video being a success for the players.
Going into a game, how much video do you use? I'd say the night before a match. Is that something that you send the players to kind of watch clips of themselves?
Yeah, so what we would traditionally do at the Euro Challenge is they would get the video for the following day, the night before. So they would get a chance to watch in their spare time. They get a chance to watch it segmentally if they wanted to. They can watch it whatever way they want. And then when we get into our video that morning of the game, we're able to fly through it, and we'd ask them, anybody see anything first that they're concerned about? And then we'd go through it based on that and stuff like that, or we'd stop at the time that they needed it to be stopped.
Have you noticed a difference between, like, with the players' confidence to watch themselves on video and kind of see the positive elements of their game? Like, I know a lot of players speak about maybe the night before or a couple of hours before a match, they'll have clips of themselves with music that they like, and they'll use it as the kind of the sports psychology side of things.
Yeah, I mean, I think our players even want, like, we videoed practice this year, and even the players wanted that. So, I mean, I think it showed the value that they found of it. And it was great for them to ask us for more video of what they were doing well, of what they weren't doing well, and things like that, collectively and individually. So, yeah, it was music to my ears when they started coming looking for the video and seeing the value of it. And I think it really helped our performance levels this year.
What was the decision to video practice? I know we had a conversation about this before.
I never really did it in the past. But I guess this year, because we weren't scrimmaging, it was by accident, really. I guess that we not the accident, but we just felt that we needed to see it as we did it, albeit not against that other opposition. Whereas it would have been always against other opposition that we would have had the video in the past, but definitely in practice. And even just, we might do our schemes 5-on-0, or we might do our schemes at 30% versus defense, and seeing certain things, and we'd video that and say, right, did you see what we can achieve from this? These are the 3 or 4 options that we can get off of that, or when Jack O'Leary was coming off the staggered ball screen, what options we can get off of that for specific players like Dara, Wede, Killian Gribben, etc., and how everybody else can complement us around that. So I think video was huge for us to be able to progress without scrimmaging against other teams, which obviously we weren't allowed to do in COVID scenarios.
I think you had a player activity for them with the training videos, was it?
Yeah, so we'd give them an activity every night, or every Sunday night. We'd put them into breakout rooms, and they would come back and we'd give them different video scenarios, or it might be defensive, or we might ask them to break down, a 3-2 defense, that the opposite that we did last year. What are our strengths if we were to run a 3-2? And we get them to make presentations, and they come up with some really, really fantastic stuff.
And how much video goes into, let's say you're scouting a team maybe a couple of weeks leading up to the Euros? I know normally with COVID you'd have loads of challenge games, so you can get video, and you're doing dodgy deals left and right in the Euros with the USB sticks, and nobody speaks English.
Yeah.
How much prep goes into the video beforehand? And I suppose after a game, how much time do you actually spend, I suppose, breaking down not only the performance that day, but preparing for the next performance probably the day after?
It's a great question. I guess it all comes down to the time, how many times they've played, have we seen them play live, have the players seen them play live. So like this year, obviously we weren't able to see who were we playing. We were the first day off, so we had Hungary and Bulgaria played first. So we went to watch it live. We were only allowed to go watch it live, and we had the players watch it, and they did their own scouting report. So that kind of helped us with that sort of analysis a little bit too. So traditionally we would have probably had a game or two that we didn't have to watch that. So we use our own eyes and we use the players' eyes to figure out how we wanted to play. But obviously as the tournament goes on, we've seen them more. And we can break that down. But usually we get to a scenario where things that we've done well in the previous game and then things that the opposition are going to do, and it generally is in around 12 minutes, between 8 and 12 minutes.
For anyone that doesn't have experience with scouting or breaking down video, what do you look for, let's say, when you're analysing the opposition?
So I used to have like millions of things on a scout report, but now it's like, what are they doing and what can we do against them? And what, if we did this action, how would they defend that? Have we seen something that they would? So really it's just 4 columns, really easy, a couple of player things. And I really dumbed down this year on our scout report to 3 things offensively that we want to achieve, 3 things defensively we want to achieve, and everything else is be aware of. So, and the players absolutely took to it like the duck to water, whereas in previous years I'd have had like 7-8 points offensively for us, 7-8 points defensively for them, 7-8 points us defensively, and just too much information. And I guess one of the things I've always done at halftime was I'd split my board in 2, 3 offensive things, 3 defensive things. So I said to myself this year, if I'm doing that at halftime, why not do it before the game? And it worked absolutely tremendously. So the first game this year, I did my old style thing, and I was like, yeah, these players are just not getting it. We haven't practiced it enough. We haven't done anything in prep. We haven't been outside the country. And I said, right, for the game 2, I'm going to take my halftime scenario, do it at the beginning, and then it just absolutely worked a treat. And I think we actually excelled because we focus on one of 2 things only, and especially under 18 level, where it's not at the level of senior players. There's so many other things going on. Those 2 or 3 key areas, offensively, defensively, which is only about 4 to 6 areas, and they took all that in, and I think we were better for it. So it's something that I'm going to take forward for the next couple of programs.
That's actually something I chat to Aaron Bracken about. I had the similar experience with my own team, not with them anymore. They were under 12, under 13, and I'll never forget it, the first match, because we had the water breaks, and in GA you then like doubled or tripled your contact time with your team, so everyone really overloaded players. And the way I did it was I then did the power of 3 similar to you, and the girls would nearly shout the things back at me. I love the way you said there, like that goes down to what you said earlier about reflection, is you're going to now take the power of 3 forward, whereas before you would have done 7, whereas then at half time it was the 3. I actually like the way you split your board in 3 and did the 3 offenses and 3 defenses there.
Yeah, and you know what, it's probably the one thing I was pretty good at using assistants for, was they'd sit down beside me. Okay, what have you seen? What are our 3 most important offensive things that we need to get right for the second half? What are our 3 most defensive things that we need to get better at for the second half? And if we focus on those things, and traditionally our 3rd quarter and our 4th have been better. So when I look back, maybe it's because we gave too much information at the start, and stuff like that. So and this year I was very cognizant of the fact that the players needed time to breathe from us as the staff in the game. So I would always send Declan in open, have him make sure that there was no conflict in the dressing room, which there never was, to be fair. But just be aware, and he would just maybe say to us, look, this is what they're hearing. And before we go in, we'd already have an answer, and we'd ask them, okay, what are we seeing out there? What are you seeing? What are you feeling out there? Who's hurting us? Who's not hurting us? Where can we exploit them? So I'd already have heard from Declan what their thoughts were, so I'd already be ahead of myself. So that was a little trick that I kind of just came up with this year.
Is there any other structure that you give to potentially, I know not for the other team's timeout, because that's sometimes you're not prepared for that, but for your own timeouts and the halftime talk? I'm just conscious if there's any GA coaches listening, as I said, trying to manage the water breaks and have all of this extra contact time with your players. It's hard not to overload them and kind of give too much information compared to before.
Yeah, and I used to normally scream in my timeouts, so yeah, I lose my rag a little bit. But I think, and I'm not going to shy from this. Learning how to question better as a guidance counselor, learning how to question better as a coach. And I think you find more information from, sometimes you have to give them the information. And I've said this before in other podcasts. What do they need now? Do they need questioning? Do they need to give me the information?
Mm-hmm.
Do I need to give them the information? Or do they need to just be given a little bit of fire under them? And I think if you follow that, I think you'll always find the best way to handle the timeout. So what do they need now? And it was when I was at Glanmire that I was given that by Canis Kennedy, a sports psychologist. But again, not knowing the value of it, I didn't take it forward to other teams until the past couple of years. So the fact that I'm now back using it, we get far more productivity from our timeouts than we've ever had in the past.
Do you ever record yourself speaking to the team, whether it's before halftime or timeouts?
I'm afraid to. Yeah, I'm not. I'm afraid to do that. Yes, but I've been encouraged. I have the microphone. I bought the microphone. I still haven't done it yet. I haven't had the bravery to go there yet, but I'm going to have to get there. Yeah, I'm going to have to get there.
I'm putting it on you. I'm going to be texting you now in a few months saying, like, did you record yourself yet? I want to talk to you a little bit about Irish basketball, I suppose. What do you see as the evolution over the last couple of years in talent, in skill, in really all areas? What have you noticed over maybe the last 10 years as the evolution of the players?
It's a wonderful question. And I think there's so many things that have happened to our society, not just basketball, but our society that has helped basketball. And I think the ethnic diversity in our society and basketball being part of that, having better athletes, having, more, Polish Irish now, more Lithuanian Irish, more African Irish, and bringing their culture to our game has definitely been a contributor to our progress at European level. I also think the advice I was given when I was started coaching is you'll only be as good as what you expose yourself to. And now if I put that on the players are now getting massive exposure on the internet. You wake up in the morning after an NBA game, they've got the NBA game broken down into 9 minutes and 20, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
They have Steph Curry YouTube videos of all his skill sets, Kyrie Irving, Joel Embiid, so our forwards are being more dynamic now and all that. But they're watching and they're seeing high-level players do all this. They're also taking some habits that they're not ready for yet. So I think the players have exposed themselves to that and they're bringing it back. And it's up to us as coaches now to be able to jump on that, utilize that resource to guide our players and be good leaders, to let them express themselves. And I was never great at that. But I think over the last 3-4 years, I've had the chance to reflect and say, I need to be better at letting the players express themselves, but also guide them on where best to utilize what they're exposing themselves to.
Yeah, I think you mentioned before in a podcast or it was an interview, but from the lads in Neptune coming home from the States, you were at practices and you would let them, you kind of take a little bit of a step back and you would let the guys that have been there, as you said, expose themselves to different players, different coaches, different levels, teach the younger players what they've seen and how to adapt to a higher level. Because like the lads who have been in the States, everybody in the club are looking towards them, so clearly like they're just going to pass on, and as everyone improves and as the lads, let's say Eli Lenihan and Sean McCarthy, who were listening at the time, they're going to come back for the next generation players. Yeah,
I think it's having the confidence as a coach to let that happen, having the experience. And I think the more that I've grown up, and some people say have I or haven't I, but the more that I've grown up, I think, and matured as a coach, I've been more confident in letting that happen. Yeah. And it's not a hit of my ego that the kids are coming in and showing like a step back move or getting to a balance or going again off a second move and showing how to do that against a cheating defense or whatever it is. And now I'm actually excited when I see that, whereas in the past I'm like, yeah, stop that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think it's having the confidence and having the ability to step back and just let that happen. and let them expose themselves to other people teaching them as well. So I think that's part of coaching now.
Yeah.
Having that confidence to step back and let them at it.
How much do you think confidence weighs in, or how much is coaching confidence? I've phrased that so badly, but I think you know what I mean.
Yeah. I think Ferguson, like I'm not a United fan, I'm a Liverpool fan, so for me to be able to say this is tough. But I think Ferguson was a master at it. You know, I think he knew which coach to put on players at the right time for them and what they needed now. You know, I'm obviously a Jurgen Klopp fan. I think he's outstanding at what he does. Pep Guardiola. But then you look at the basketball element of it, and you look at like Brad Stevens and his demeanor and what he does, and you know, I think we can learn from that and how coaches really let other coaches take part of it. And I suppose that's a major thing that I've tried to work on since 2019, especially, of giving autonomy to assistant coaches so they can be part of the process and the players can trust them just as much as they can trust me. So I think having that confidence as a coach to not let your ego swallow up everybody else's development, and let them be part of the process as well.
What kind of roles do you give the assistant coaches in the program?
You know, I think the last couple of years I've found out what their strengths were. So it's not always the same the whole time. Sometimes it's actually to be good for me, which in turn is good for the players. You know, I've had you know, Niall Berry was our assistant this year, and he was great for me in realigning my beliefs, and he was great in terms of being that player for the players, you know, talking their language and having all that for them. And he was, you know, very good in the game scenarios, and Niall was great talking to the players coming off the floor. So everybody's role is going to be different. And then other assistants I probably haven't taken advantage of their strengths enough. Because I wasn't good enough as a head coach to delegate. I wanted everything to be done by me. So I think having confidence to let go, having the ability to delegate and knowing where to delegate for the strengths of the assistant is important. And it's still something I'm evolving in as a head coach.
I actually meant to ask you this question earlier, but after a game, talk us through sort of the breakdown with the players, let's say in the dressing room afterwards, and then as you go towards breaking down the video of the game in preparation for the next one.
It has been 8 years since I've been in the dressing room post game.
Okay.
We talk for 10 seconds, maybe 15 seconds after a game, and pretty much, you know, good job, not so good job. We know where we need to get better at, but nothing is in depth post game anymore.
Okay. Why is that?
So I think as a coach and as players, we don't have a proper analysis of the game immediately. Yeah. So the emotion has to come out of the game. And I generally watch the game before I give a proper analysis of the game again. But again, that came about because when I was coaching Glanmire, I couldn't go in the dressing room after the game because there were females. And I really enjoyed not going into the dressing room. So it's since the 2014 season, I haven't been inside in the dressing room post game. So then obviously we'd have 24 hours before we'd get to see the players again, and I'd have watched the game probably 3 times by then.
And what goes into the analysis where you present to the players the following day? Like, do you mention those 3 offensive and 3 defensive goals that you had, or is it just reflecting on the game overall?
So we'd start with those areas, and then we'd have a general reflection of things that, you know, we probably weren't aware of during the game, that we didn't see during the game, that maybe we didn't see as a staff on the game, that maybe mistakes that we made. And then we'd go back into certain scenarios where we could have done collectively. I'd never really call a player out individually, but I might talk to them on their own. But in a general meeting, it would be general statements of, we didn't do this. You know, I can't stand coach that said I or them, or it's always a we. So like if a player doesn't perform something, it's on us collectively. It's on did us as a staff give the give the instruction properly that the player can execute, or did we not teach it properly, or but it's definitely a we thing, and it's our team. It's not my team. It's not my players. It's our staff. We all are in this, and it's the role that we have in the environment, and we're all part of this. So it's not my staff. It's not my players. So that's something that I'm very firm in my belief of not being. It's my players, my staff, my assistant coaches. It's our team, and I think that's something that we've always done really well. Is not a my and an I. It's an us and it's a we environment.
When did you develop that we mentality, or was that something you just naturally had from your underage experience, maybe coaching?
I did my master's in sports psychology in 2006 to 2008 with Jerry Fitzpatrick. He said one thing: a coach's best attribute is his words and his word box. And I suppose that's when I really started getting into the whole language and the we and stuff like that. So Jerry Fitzpatrick was a massive influence in terms of developing that vocabulary and that language of an us environment.
And out of interest, with the stats, how much does that play into let's say your post game analysis? And I know basketball is probably different to GAA, and I was at the men's European Championships, and sure, by quarter I was handed everyone's individual stats. But is that something that you obviously give the players, the individual stats, but how much are the stats a focus maybe in your analysis?
I've never really been a stats guy. I think it's just informed us of how a trend in the game is going. So I never really look at, I never judge a player on how many shots he made or missed, but I might look at it and say, right, okay, he hasn't shot well. What's our reflection on that? Yeah, that tells us that, but he might have had a lot of uncontested shots. He might just not have made them. Mm-hmm. Whereas other days, he's 0 for 7, but he's taken too many contested shots. So we need to address that. Or rebounds is a massive thing that we look at, and that kind of tells us whether we're struggling defensively or offensively, or if we're dictating the game. And then assists. So we are really looking for, we really want to be in around the 20 assist mark for games. So that's 5 per quarter. And if we're down, there's generally a correlation to the lack of assists that we've had. So that's something that we would look at. But again, it's informative rather than kind of dictating what way we want to go. It's just giving us some information of where we may need to do better for an individual or for a team.
You mentioned previously Bob McKillop and Davidson, and you've gone to Duke camps as well. What were those experiences like, and what were some of the takeaways that you remember just being like, geez, that makes so much sense, or something that you still use to this day that you've learned from those experiences?
If I was to go now, I'd probably take more advantage of it. I probably didn't take advantage of those opportunities as good as I would have liked to.
How so?
Probably the nuances and how both staffs actually developed a connection with players. When I was there, it was very much, I like that drill, I like, how they did that scheme or whatever it is. So I didn't really do a good enough job as a young coach in understanding how the chemistry that was developed and how the relationships that were developed and how the connections and how players came back during camp to help the current players be part of that. And one of the things that both groups obviously did really well was had senior players teach young players or the freshmen coming in of what the standard was, what the value of the program was. And I never really got that when I was there until now. So I'm a bit slow on the uptake. I'm not the brightest guy in the planet when it comes to this sort of stuff, and it takes me a while to catch on. But I think if I got that earlier, maybe did a bit more success with the teams I've had over the past couple of years.
I think that's something that coaches are only really kind of getting to grasp with it now, and the importance of the values and building relationships. But I suppose with the US coaches, to recruit a player, you're building that relationship, because Zion Williamson is going to have every college in the country coming after him, and it doesn't matter what drills you do, what you say to him, it's that relationship that he built with Coach K that's what attracted him to the team. And I think that's what I get the sense of a lot of players when they talk about their recruitment to US colleges, is the relationship they build with the coach. And maybe I do think that basketball coaches in the States are probably that bit ahead of them, ahead of other sports and other cultures, because they've had to build that relationship and recruit and sell their program to a Zion, because sure, he could go anywhere.
Yeah, I think I've always wondered what a relationship is, and I've over the last couple of years I kind of really broke it down to two things: care and connect. And we've all heard the phrase, after the player knows you care, that all that sort of stuff. But I think for them to allow you care for them, you have to build a connection first. So relationships is care and connect. And then, during all that process, there's going, in the intensity of a battle, your relationship is going to rupture at some point. So how deep you've built that connection will determine how quick that rupture repairs. So I think developing that relationship is a difficult thing. I used to always think it was the care element of it, and I showed a lot of care to my players. But when I look back, it wasn't enough. I was always wondering what was missing. And I didn't really have that connection with players. I didn't, delve into their personal life, their outside life, what else triggered their enjoyment in life, not just the game of basketball. So connecting with players is massively important from what I've looking back and experiencing and developed over the summer. And then having that care to help the connection, so that when you do get on a player and you do demand more of them that they think they're giving at that time, that you're able to repair that really quickly because of the connection that you built. I think that's hugely important. I didn't understand the value of that when I was a younger coach.
I have a question here. If you could be a fly on the wall for a week with any team or coach in the world, who would it be and why?
So many. There's so many. I think if you're looking at modern day, I think you've got to look at Jurgen Klopp. I just think what he does with what he has, sustaining it. I mean, like, to not spend any money and still be where he is this summer compared to everybody else, there has to be genius in there somewhere. And take out the fact that I'm a Liverpool fan and all this sort of stuff.
You're biased, Paul.
But I think you have to understand, and I think he obviously builds a connection and a relationship, and it comes through every player back as far as Lewandowski and stuff like that. Whereas I think if you look at Pep Guardiola, he's just able to be so good with what he does in building a team to play sexy football or beautiful football or whatever it is. So I think from a basketball perspective, there's just so many out there at the moment. I just think you have to look at the coaches in any sport that develop, like Brad Stevens is amazing. Rick Bird at Belmont really fascinated me when he was with Belmont. I would love to have done that. So I think, I just think what Jurgen Klopp, I'd love to see, because he's just so fiery, and he's just, and he's humorous, and he's got all the characteristics and charm and all that. How does he make that work and still demand and get the best out of bringing Divock Origi, who hasn't played in months, and yet he has put in a performance against AC Milan like that? How does that happen, and how does he make his connections and his relationships really benefit the group? So that would be fascinating to watch.
Out of interest, have you ever reached out to coaches just at any level in any sport to kind of pick their brain or observe sessions? Have you ever done that?
I started over COVID. I didn't have the confidence to do it prior to it. And I've developed so many relationships now over COVID, and involved with, get to know so many players in or coaches in different countries, that's something that's definitely going to happen, hopefully, when COVID finishes. But I was never confident enough to reach out to coaches of that ilk when I was younger. So I see an awful lot of coaches do it now, or younger coaches do it now, and I would absolutely encourage them to do it and go for it. And if you get rejected, you get rejected. And I have been rejected, obviously, during COVID, but it doesn't matter. They can only say no.
What would you hope to pick up from some of those sessions?
Sometimes it's tactical. Sometimes it's how to handle the dressing room. Sometimes it's how do you handle, not necessarily a rebellious player, but somebody that's really struggling to buy into what we're trying to achieve, and things like that. So I think it depends on the context of what you're trying to achieve with the coach. And sometimes you get all of them, sometimes you get one of them. But yeah, so it's definitely something like that, you know.
I'm going to ask you for a coaching book or podcast recommendation.
So I'm not really a great reader, but I love audiobooks, and I listen to Coach the Coach. And I actually got that recommendation from Mike McKay. And it's an easy listen to. It's about 17 chapters. And it just kind of helped me realign on how to be an enthusiastic coach for my athletes, and how I can be there for them, not just myself, and go beyond the winning. And hopefully by developing that relationship and connection, that it'll help the success of the program. And you know, everybody's saying this again, like, is, you know, it's about people and stuff like this. It is, but each person requires a different thing within your environment. So what's the person's why, and does it connect with the team's why? So if you just go in with the one why, or we want to coach people and this and that, whatever, it's a great way to look at it. But I also think that there are 12 different whys on the team. So how are we able to mesh all those whys into the team why? And can we make that be a success for what we want to try and achieve?
What is the team why, out of interest?
Each team is different. You know, I think this year was to get back on the floor, compete, you know, put in performances. We knew we were down players. We knew we were, you know, on the back end of other federations having played for 12 months. We hadn't even practiced for 12 months. Not mind said played. So it was, you know, it was to develop a camaraderie that would be better than everybody else to help us compete. And I think we definitely achieved that. That was something that we were very, very successful with. Maybe not in terms of wins and losses, but definitely in terms of what we set out was, let's make this the best possible team we can. Let's make it full of chemistry, and let's go and give it a go. And I think that's something that we did really well.
Is there a particular podcast recommendation that you give the listeners?
I think the Coaches Club podcast is really good right now, with Luke Gromer. You know, and I think JP Nurbin's one, the culture podcast. I think they're two really good ones when you're looking beyond the X's and O's. And I think the coaching series that you're doing right now is really good too.
Good man. I was waiting for that. Brilliant. So I have 3 questions in from former players. Shout out to Darragh Sullivan. Darragh, you better be listening. But question 1 from his 3. The top 5 players you've coached all time, both raw talent and overall player.
Darragh's always pushed the boundaries, haven't he?
I didn't give you this one as well, so you've had no time to prep.
I'm gonna plead the fifth on that one, because I haven't had enough time to prep on that one.
Okay, well, I'll come back to you at some point for an answer on that, right? Favourite team you've coached, club and at international level?
That's a tough one now. I think every team has brought something different. I think one of the best transition teams that we had was the 2018 team in Kosovo. I thought the way we transitioned, the way the ball moves in transition, I thought they were absolutely exceptional. I thought the 2019 team was really good in terms of the tempo and being able to play with the style that was required for that particular game. I thought they were a really skilled, intellectual team. I thought the first year in Neptune, I thought we were fun to watch. I thought we were really fun to watch. You know, obviously being the first Super League team when I was 29 with Demons, that was a very fun team to watch, and taught me a lot. I thought Shane Collin as a player taught me how to deal with a player of his ilk that I'd never dealt with before, in terms of the dynamism that he had and the intellectual play of playing inside and outside. Oh my God, I could go on. Every team I've really enjoyed. I can't say that one team was...
For different reasons.
Yeah, for different reasons. I just, you know, it's one of the reasons why I like to coach, is the different personalities, the different dynamics of a team, the different strengths, and then being able to adjust to hopefully let them utilize their strengths more. So I know I'm not leaving some team off, and I'm going to get in trouble for leaving the specific team off.
Everyone be on to you now after listening to
this. I mean, even the first Irish team, I had the pleasure of being able to lead Roy Downey's team with Paddy Sullivan and Lorcan Murphy. That was a team that nobody expected anything to be done, and that was probably the funnest win. Was their success against Estonia on Estonia's home floor in the last game of the European Championships, 88-84. And we'd come off a really bad loss against Belgium the day before. And we got absolutely spanked. So being able to turn that around and beat Estonia on their home floor was definitely a major thing that made me want to go back into or continue into international coaching.
Out of interest, you mentioned fun teams to watch. Can you relax and enjoy a match now? I'm watching, a game. I shouldn't be calling it a match. And speaking to a basketball coach, can you sit back and enjoy watching a game, or are you consistently picking up what are they doing? What is this player doing? What kind of plays are they running?
My wife kills me because I will rewind.
You're one of those. Games. I'm one of those as well.
I rewind and I get my phone and I will screen record on my television and I embed them in. So I'm not I enjoy watching other sports. Yeah. When it comes to basketball, I don't know if I can just sit back and enjoy. There's always something I'm trying to pick up, whether it's a dynamic movement by a player, whether it's an action, whether it's. I've actually started to watch an awful lot of sideline demeanors from coaches. So I would start on that in all sports. So watching how they're reacting to certain situations, any kind of adverse situations, how they're reacting to that, their body language, how they're speaking to players. Because it's something I feel I have to be better at. So I've actually started watching coaches on the sideline now.
Okay, interesting. Final question from Dara. What is your favourite cup win of all time?
Man, Dara's put me on the spot. I can tell you the one that hurt the most. They've all been fun for different reasons. I mean, Glenmoira's one was massively fun because it was just such a high level game between ourselves and Limerick, and people forget that game in the last 10 years, and I think it's still
on YouTube actually. Yeah, I was watching it the other day actually.
I still think it's the best, and maybe because we won that game I could say that, but it was such a high scoring game. I mean, when do you see a women's game score 54 points in the first half? We were just so dynamic in that game, and they went ahead by 15 and we came back, and Emily had the chance to win on the buzzer and it went off, and then we go to overtime and Grania has her first offensive rebound of the game in overtime, and so that was a very, very fun final. Two that hurt the most was obviously losing to Limerick in the cup final in our first one with Demons. The Underrating Cup with Neptune hurt massively against Templeogue. I thought we were the better team, and I thought one or two decisions went against us. And actually, I think Darragh was fouled in the last play. I'm still adamant on that. That he was fouled, and I know Darragh would have made the 3 free throws to win by 1. So so I can tell you the ones that hurt the most. Enjoy. They've all been very enjoyable for different reasons. I mean, obviously the treble winning with the 20s, Division 1 and 18s was a great weekend. But they've all been fun in so many different ways.
You mentioned there, Dara, for example, he got fouled on that shot. He takes the 3 free throws at the end of the game to win the National Cup. So you're in a high pressure situation. Do you think, that's just an example now I'm giving you, is that, let's say he makes the 3 free throws, for players to step up in big moments like that and under high pressure, is that down to their ability or their character?
I think their character allows them utilize their ability. I think it's a great question. I've never really delved into that, but I definitely think their character allows them to utilize their ability in the right way at that moment in a pressure cooker situation. If you don't have the character, it doesn't matter what ability you have, because I don't think you have the mental strength to be able to do that. So I think certain players are really good at that. Some players are really good at we call our players this year tone setters and game changers. And over the years, I don't think I've ever really started what people would perceive to be the best 5 players. But I've always said, how are we going to start the game? So, for example, Sean Jenkins played a wonderful role my first year with Neptune as the first guy off the bench. And we set the tone with 5 different players. But Sean was automatic points off the bench. So we always knew that we had points coming off the bench. And he still played this 20, 26, 27, 28 minutes, maybe even more. And obviously the cup final that year, he had 37. He came off the bench with 3 minutes in and didn't come off the floor until I think the last 30 seconds. So again, you've got your tone setters and you've your game changers. And I believe that you have to have game changers coming off the bench. They might be great starters as well. But I think in the context of who you have you got game changers coming off that can build on the tone that was set by the game, by the tone guys.
Speaking of character, does sport build or reveal character?
I hate that question. I hate that quote. Because I think everybody has different characters in different scenarios. So as a young coach, I probably wasn't great in the heat of the moment, and probably wasn't a great leader for players, but it didn't affect my character as a coach. But maybe in that particular moment, I wasn't the right person to lead young players or whatever it was. I think I'm better at it now. But I don't know if it reveals character. I just think that your character is probably best suited to certain moments as opposed to, revealing it and all that sort of stuff. But I just think it's such a cliche thing now that I think we need to look deeper into that and look at what players are best suited to being a leader in certain situations.
Yeah, I know what you mean. We're going to move on to the sideline 7. It's the same 7 questions at the end of every episode. Question 1, what is your favourite quote?
I have 2.
I'll allow it.
Aristotle's I'm not forgetting it. It happened to me last time as well. But there's a Chinese one as well.
Do you want to Google them there?
No. Well, I might check the Aristotle one. But one of my favourite ones, and I suppose coming off of where I am at the minute, a gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials. Chinese proverb. So that's probably my favourite one, and it's actually on my email when it goes out.
Okay, interesting. Do you know the Aristotle one? Sorry.
Aristotle, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act, but a habit.
Love it. It's like that quote: "Make habits rather than choices."
Correct.
Question 2: best sporting event you've been to?
I've been very fortunate. I was at a bunch of Liverpool, Newcastle 4-2s, 4-3s. I've been to the Final Four a bunch of times in the States. I was actually at, which was a great event, the American football game in Croke Park. The other final that Cork lost to Clare in the replay. I thought that was a pretty good one as well. So I've been to quite a few that I really enjoyed, to be honest. But yeah, definitely they've been the ones.
Is there any standout moment or a game that you've been involved in? Can you narrow it down?
Standout moment in the game.
Is it the game where you slid across the floor to the slide tackle?
Yeah. That was actually a great game. We played that was with UL Eagles. We played Kelleher in the IWA, and I think it was our second last game of the season. And we'd set, and James Brophy, I remember James Brophy was wonderful in that game. Jimmy and Turner had killed us below in Limerick, and Brophy was outstanding, and he took away Jermaine. And that happened just before half time. The ball came on the court, and I just,
instinct.
It just
Your
instinct.
Inner soccer player came out there, Paul.
Yeah, I was the centre back, and you could see it too. But no, I think, obviously the referees had seen it. It would have stopped the game, and the shot clock will. I remember just saying the shot clock will change, so I need to get this off, and
Yeah.
that's all that happened. And we went in. I think it was an 8 or 9 up at halftime. We maintained it, and I think we won that by 3 or 4 down the stretch. So, yeah, that was actually a fun win as well. Yeah.
Very good. Third question: biggest setback or challenge so far in your career?
Biggest setback. Probably actually COVID, not realizing what I didn't know as a younger coach, and being able to help younger players. Realizing that was a massive setback in the last couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm. On the flip side, then a bit more positive. Your biggest achievement on or off the court?
My daughter. Yeah, definitely. She's definitely brought a bundle of joy into my life in the last 3 or 4 years. From the time that we knew we were having her to know even before I got in this podcast, just putting smiles in myself and my wife's face, and connecting us. That's probably the biggest achievement by a proverbial mile. Yeah.
Does she like basketball?
Anything to do with the ball. It could be golf.
Really?
It could be camogie. The our neighbour across the road. I think Cora had just learned to walk. And Laura brought her out for a walk, and she came back with a hurley and a sliotar. And so anything to do with soccer ball, and we could be out the back kicking, throwing, and it could change sports 4 or 5 times in about 10 minutes. When we play soccer, when we do basketball, when we do this, so it could change anything. It could be dancing. I mean, she's liable to just pull me off the couch and say, right, Daddy, let's go dancing. And if you've seen me dance, that's not a good sight. So, but she manages to do it.
Brilliant. Advice to your 18-year-old self?
Emotional control. That's an easy one. Being able to handle your emotions in every environment. That's something I would definitely say to my younger self.
Dream dinner guest and why? And you can open the table up to a few people.
So I've thought of this, and I've listened to every guest talk about this, and I think I would actually split this up into 3.
3 different dinners?
No, the one meal, but starter would be players when I started coaching, and what I was like to coach them. Halfway through, the next set of players and see where I evolved with there, and then the dessert would be players in the last couple of years to see what that was like, and just to see where I came from, what I did, what I didn't do well, how I treated them. It would be a difficult task, but I think that's something I would love to do at some point. Is go back where it all started. How good was I to them? How did I treat them? And then building it over and see where I've evolved, where I've gotten, where I regressed, what was good, what wasn't so good, to help maybe the next 20 years of players that I hope to be involved with.
At the end of a program, do you ask players for feedback on their experience?
I think Google's forums and everything else has been an absolutely tremendous asset for us as coaches, whether it's in program review, whether it's in the practice review, whether it's pre-practice checking in to see how they are, and learning how to use those resources to benefit each element of the program, whether it's practice, whether it's individually, whatever it is. Yeah. But definitely I did it this year. I actually used it to maybe get some feedback from players in the last couple of years of what was done well, what wasn't done well, how I acted as a person within the environment that we're trying to create, the us and the we. And some of the stuff was tough to read, and some of it was great to read. But this program was the first time we actually did a proper exit out, and it was very beneficial for all our staff and for the entire program, and seeing would they like to be involved in international setup again. And I suppose that was the question at the end that kind of really epitomized, this was a success because they all want to play for their country again.
Okay, interesting. I'm interested in the pre and post training questionnaires. What kind of questions do you ask them there out of interest?
post how the practice go, what were the areas we did well, what didn't we do well, how did you think you performed, where do you think you are right now after that practice, all that sort of stuff. And it just led to other one-on-one conversations. Still toying with the pre-practice one, but I think the post-practice we kind of got pretty good, but the pre-practice we're still working on that and developing that to see how they are coming into practice and all that sort of stuff. So how we, some player might have had a bad day in school, some player, whatever it is. So we're just trying to find all those things out and then having that conversation with them to see how we're going to handle that practice with them if needs be.
That's actually something I mentioned with Jenny Cody, and she kind of said, well, everything is tools for conversation. And like those forms are tools for you to approach. Let's say I had a terrible day in school. That's a tool for you to approach me and say, look, Orla, you've had a terrible day. Can I help, or what's up, or whatever?
Yeah, definitely. And I think you get more back because of that. Over the years we've let players miss practice because it was the best thing for them at that particular time, and we got more out of them at the next practice because of that. Whereas I think sometimes, obviously it's got to be a great reason for you to miss practice. It can't be just like, I feel like not to come to practice, like that's not acceptable. But it might be a family situation. It might be, something that's coming up in school or whatever it is. But I think we've managed it really well over the years for legitimate reasons. If they need to, whatever, miss practice, if it's best for them right now. And that's something I think we've always done well. So.
Very good. Final question before I let you go. If your life was a book, what chapter would this be called?
Reinvention.
Okay. This is from all of your reflection over COVID.
Yeah, definitely reinvention.
So what can I expect now if I was coming in as a player? Put pressure on now.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think, having a better emotional control is something I've really tried to work on as a coach. I think it's something that all coaches are working on right now. I think we're very much aware of, what society we're in right now, how we treat people, and maybe the perception of coaching was that screaming guy and you weren't a great coach unless you were screaming and stuff like that. So, so I think the perception of what a coach is has changed. And because of that perception, I think we've actually, with the brilliant sharing from all sports over COVID, I think we're on a good path for better coaching to occur. And when I say coaching, that's developing relationships, developing our tactical awareness, developing our skill development processes, our player development processes, how we develop pre-practice plans or pre-practice information, post-practice information. But I think coaching has definitely become a wider thing now than what we ever thought was possible maybe five years ago. So I think coaching in all sports, in all areas, is going to take a massive increase. And I think we're, with Kelleher at Limerick, I think he's brought that to the highlighted that with GAA. So I think, I think we've evolved as Irish sport, where other nations were ahead of us in the past. But I think the fact that we're latching on really quickly in all codes, I think is a wonderful thing for Irish sport. And I'd like to think that in the next number of years that we'll have more professional coaches within our society and within our sporting context in this country, that the government will back that and help coaching be an actual profession for people, that we can keep our best coaches here in Ireland.
Great point. Look, I'm going to end it there. Paul, thank you so much for your time. We could have kept going for another 5 hours. Just want to wish you the best of luck with the programme this year and beyond.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a million for your time.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Best of luck.
A big thanks to Paul for joining me on today's episode. You can find all of his social media links in the description box below, and he's plenty of webinars on YouTube if you'd like more information. If you did enjoy the episode, I'd really appreciate if you could leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts, as it does help the show grow. Don't forget to sign up to the newsletter and visit the website thesidelinelive.com for more exclusive content. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.